Matthew Amen, please. Matthew, come in and have a seat.
Thank you.
Okay, Matthew, you're a fourth year medic or?
Third year medic.
Third year medic,
Yes.
okay. And I've only met Matthew briefly because I spot him as the guy running around making sure everything happens in the background. Or quite
Yes,
a lot
that's
of it.
me. It's quite
That's
stressful,
right.
to be honest.
Yeah, okay. Stressful.
A little bit, but everything's gone well so far, so
Okay,
we're all happy.
Okay. And Matthew, we'd love to get a bit of a feel for your story. We're not going to delve very deep, so don't
Thank
worry.
goodness.
But it would be great just to hear, one of the things that I often ask people is what makes life tick for you, okay? And we're going to come back to that. But to build up to that, I'd love to find out just a bit about how we got to where we are here. So I've got a picture of you as a little boy running around, and you're 5. So where are you? And what's your situation and what are you doing?
So I grew up in a little town called Bonnyrigg, which is just south of Edinburgh, if anyone knows it. Very good. It's a very, very, very normal little town, very working class, built on the mines, 50 years ago. And I was staying there with my mum and my dad. My dad is a train driver and my mum is a kind of accountant person for a building firm. And also my older brother, who is 25 now, so he's 5 years older than me. So he would have been 10 when I was 5, running around, probably bullying me, hitting me, that kind of thing.
And I've got a picture then of a very normal, average, ordinary kind of situation. Is that?
Yes, yeah, very average. 3-bedroom house, modest garden. So yeah, just normal upbringing.
Okay, so for you as a kid, as you got a bit older, what lifted you above that sense of average, ordinary, just doing whatever? What began to define you, or to give shape to your own life?
Yeah, so I was always fairly good at sport when I was younger. I kind of played football and rugby and things like that. And then when I was about 7 years old, I started to play ice hockey, which was quite an unusual thing for that time.
Although you're in the right part of the world, aren't you? From the temperatures out there.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely,
anyway.
absolutely. Scotland's actually quite big for ice hockey.
Yeah, all right, good. Yeah.
Yeah, so when I was about 7 years old, I started playing ice hockey, and I kind of quickly found out I was okay at it, and kind of rose through the ranks of Edinburgh Junior Ice Hockey Club. And then when I was about 16 or 17, I kind of got involved with the GB squad and things like that. So that was kind of the predominant feature of my life at that time, was ice hockey. I didn't really do much else. I kind of spent 6 days a week either training or playing that. Wow. So that was the dominant feature in my life, my childhood.
Now you've got to help me here. I'm a complete. I know nothing about ice hockey. Okay, so what position? Did you have a particular position? Did you have a particular skill? Was there something they said? Matthew's the guy who's particularly good at this bit of the game. Give us a picture of you as an ice hockey.
Yeah, so when I started ice skating, I could skate backwards. So they put me in defence because you have to skate backwards most of the time. So I was a defender. I didn't really score many goals, but whenever you see ice hockey hits and people fighting and things, that's generally the defender's job. So I was never very, very good at fighting, but I was pretty good at hitting people. So that was kind of my thing, I guess.
Wow! How do you hit people? You mean you whack them with?
No. You either put your shoulder through them or your hips or something and knock them over.
And you wear lots of protective stuff. Is that right? You get kitted up.
So the puck moves at about 70 miles an hour on an average shot. So you're kitted head to toe on the front of your body with fairly thick padding to stop anything getting broken.
Yeah. And what really gave you the kind of zing? What in ice hockey? What was it that gave you the hit about that? The thing you most loved about it?
It was, I think, the competitiveness of it. I think that it was a sport that I got to a level at where I could kind of compete with some of the best guys in the country. And so there's always that drive to do more, to do better. to take the position of the guy that's slightly above you in the squad. So I really enjoyed that, kind of always chasing the high of being the best, I guess.
Yeah. So if somebody says, well, who's Matthew Amo, right? That somebody said, well, he's the guy who does ice hockey. He's the ice hockey guy. So this became a kind of a late defined you. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. I was the guy that played ice hockey in school.
Right. And how did that feel?
Yeah, it was pretty good, to be honest.
Yeah.
You stand out from the crowds, and it keeps you fit as well. And so people paid attention to you because you were the sporty guy that played a cool sport that no one else does.
Yeah. So we're on our way up in this story, aren't we, folks? But I get the feeling something's going to happen next. So because you're not doing ice hockey now, I take it. Oh,
no, not anymore. No,
not at all. So you could have fulfilled that dream. Team GB was around. You could have made that your thing. So tell us what happened next.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. I was in my last year of high school, and yeah, things were going fairly well with the kind of GB, and the pro team in Edinburgh kind of got me involved with the training and things. And there was a really harsh Slovakian coach for the pro team. And he was just a pretty mean guy, to be honest, and I think that the older guys could cope with that, but because I was this young, this kind of newbie, I was easy pickings for him. So I quickly kind of started getting yelled at in practice and didn't really get to play a huge amount. So I went from sort of being on the ice fairly consistently to kind of being what they call a bench warmer, where you keep the bench warm for everyone else that's going on and off the ice. So I quickly kind of lost that feeling of doing well in ice hockey, and I was just kind of demoted to this guy that's on the team for, no one really knows why. He's this young guy. Who does he think he is? Not really playing a huge amount, and it kind of felt a wee bit rubbish, to be honest.
Yeah. A big bit rubbish.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, what was that like? So, being honest, what was it like sometimes?
Yeah, I think throughout my years playing, you develop your own sense of self-worth for yourself, and if you give yourself self-worth, you give yourself meaning. Your meaning is playing ice hockey and being on the team, and doing well, and people around you appreciate that. So you've developed your self-worth, and therefore you've given yourself self-meaning, and that all kind of crumbled away. And because I didn't have much else in my life at that point, I kind of felt really angry that this sport, this thing that I had adored for ages, had all of a sudden given me nothing. It's taken everything away after giving me everything in my life, and it just stripped everything, and I was kind of left with nothing else, to be honest.
So, and because your sense of who you are is so bound up with that, I think you're saying that. So when it was going well, you were going well, and
yes,
you're
exactly.
Somebody, and now it's not going so well. And who are you now?
A nobody, really.
Yeah, it's the kind of boom or bust ego.
Yes, yeah, a nobody in your own self-perception as well. Other people might not be thinking that, but in terms of who you think you are, you're not much. You're not liking who you're looking at.
Yeah, and then you come up to university soon after that.
So I kind of on a spur, and what I felt was a bit of rebellion towards this my previous self of being the sportsman. I applied to university, and I ended up here. So I'm in Dundee and I'm doing medicine. So surely the best university in the UK to do medicine. Absolutely, yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Sure,
number one all the way.
Yeah.
Yes, and now I'm here.
Right. And this sense of who you are, how does that begin to develop, or what happens next in terms of who Matthew is? Yeah.
So I think a bit of backstory. My brother is a good few years older than me, and he works, or he did work for the Royal Conservatoire in Glasgow for their CU, their Christian Union. He was kind of an older guy that kind of oversaw things, and And so when I came to uni, I kind of felt obliged to go to the Christian Union at least once at the start, because word would get back to my brother and he'd tell my parents and it would be terrible and I'd get shouted at. So I went along kind of not knowing anything, not expecting anything. And then I met some really, well, the first thing that struck me was the people. The people in the CU were amazing, and they were just different. And they really wanted to be your friend, and I met a really great group of guys that are slightly older than me. And to be honest, they're the reason I kept coming every so often to the CU.
And just to be clear, Christianity, faith, was around in your family, right?
Yes.
Up until there, but it wasn't something you had engaged with yourself.
No. So I'd grown up in a church, and I'd gone to Sunday school, and my parents were both Christians, and I had always thought that it was kind of an artefact that had passed from my parents' roots in Orkney, where everyone goes to church because it's just what you do. And I'd always thought it was something like that. I didn't really realise what it was. So I just left it alone. I thought, this is wonderful, it makes my parents feel good. They're going to somewhere to find meaning and to find the answers. But to be honest, I'm not too interested. I don't think I need that at the moment. I've got the ice rink where I can go and, find my equivalent, as it were. And I'd heard the Bible stories, and I didn't think there was anything to learn from it. How many times can you read the story of Noah, and why would you think you'd learn anything from the story of Noah or Jonah? And so I just kind of left it alone. I thought, that's wonderful, but not for me. It might not be true, probably isn't true, so I'll just leave it alone.
And what would you say? And so I sense, well, here you are. So something happened on that journey in which you discovered a Christian faith for yourself. Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, so as I was saying, I was kind of coming to the CU fairly regularly, still not really understanding what was going on. And then I asked myself two really simple questions. I asked myself, could this be true? And if it is true, what does it mean for me? And so for the first answer, or for the first question, I discovered that before I thought the Bible was improbable, probably wasn't true. But then I discovered that, in fact, the history surrounding it is actually pretty good in evidence. And so I thought, well, if this is true, which is looking more likely than it is, what does it actually mean for me? And then I discovered that it means that I am made in the image of God. I am made in the image of the person, or the God that created me, my creator. And because of that, I am in his family. He has chosen me to be in his family and to have a relationship with him. And through that I can find my identity and who I am, who I really am. And I think that my previous history with kind of putting my identity and putting who I was in things that are earthly and can crumble into something that is just so wonderful and strong that it can never falter. And if God chooses to have a relationship with me, that will never change. And that's just the most amazing thing ever.
Yeah. So in a way, you're standing on a foundation that's more stable, secure. It's not a boom or bust thing. It's always there. But what does it mean to say? When you say my identity is something different now. I mean, what is your identity now, then, Matthew?
Well, I suppose my identity is again in the fact that I am made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And that it opens up so much more as a human, if you understand that you are in fact, made in the image of God
and you're loved by God unconditionally.
Yes, God wants to have a relationship with the people He's made, and therefore, because you're part of His family, you are loved by God.
Okay, and we're going to tie up now. You'll be pleased to know. Brilliant, thanks so much. But I'm just wondering, do you do any ice hockey now at all, or?
I personally don't play any, but I still like to watch it.
You would
on
like to watch it,
TV
yeah.
and YouTube, and I have many friends that are playing professional ice hockey in this country and overseas. So it's really wonderful that I can still appreciate and love sports and music and art, and these are all built on that foundation of my identity now in God and my relationship with God. And I can still enjoy these things, and I can still pursue medicine, I can still pursue surgery, and not be scared that if those things fail, my life fails and my life crumbles. I can still be sure in the fact that I will have my sure identity in God.
Can we give Matthew a big round of applause? Thanks so much, Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It's very helpful. If you've been brought along by a CU friend or someone that's got a bit of feedback connection with the CU, this week is all about story. So just throw them on the spot, ask them what the story is, and they might hate you, but just ask them anyway.
Stories of identity, and we've heard from Matthew a bit of his story. And in the first of the Bourne series of action thriller movies, The Bourne Identity, do you remember that? I mean, it's endlessly repeated. You must have seen it on telly. The movie begins with a young man being fished out of the sea, fighting for his life. He's no idea who he is, and with nothing to go on other than a Swiss bank account, buried in his hip, a Swiss bank account number, the opening scene pitches us into the central question of that movie, which is this: who is Jason Bourne? He's got the combat skills of a world-class spy, he discovers, but he scratches his head, what are they for? And he soon discovers there are people out there who want him dead. But why? What has he done? And if you think about it, Bourne's dilemma is a portrait of the human dilemma, isn't it? We emerge into a world not of our own making, but who are we? We have skills and strengths. We do ice hockey. We can send men to the moon. We can get down to investigate the smallest atom and the particles further in than that. Enormous skills. What are they for? We convince ourselves that we've got significance, but why? We're just dust that was thrown up out of the earth, and we live for 70 years and 10, and I'm 6 months over already. And then, after a little while after that, the dust falls back into the ground, and in just 3 generations, no one remembers who you are. No one remembers who you were. And yet, despite that, we still look up into the sky and we think, I've got significance. Why? Who are we? And it's a question that I think, if we're honest, is always there. It's underneath. And here we are in this marketplace of ideas. I'm always saying that. We call it a university. And it should be a marketplace of ideas. And I pitched up with my stall. And I'm so grateful you're giving me a hearing to talk about some of the things that have been important in my life. My story is, very briefly, after leaving here, I graduated medicine, trained in psychiatry, went down to Bristol, worked my way through academia, and became professor of psychiatry in Nottingham, and then back to Bristol and professor of psychiatry there until I retired just a few years back. But I've set my pitch up here to ask whether you've thought about what the Christian faith has to say about this big question. Who am I? What is my identity? Better get a couple of questions out of the way first. What is identity? You know, people give whole talks and they don't actually get around to saying what we mean by it. What is personal identity? First question. The second is, and why does it matter? Okay. So, what is identity? Well, you know, we human beings, we're questioning creatures. just by nature. We by our very makeup, we don't sit there and evaluate the world. We're always moving forward into the world. And we're always moving forward and asking questions of the world. Why? What? What's the story here? What's going on? And uniquely among living creatures, we humans not only evaluate the world out there, we evaluate ourselves as well. Who? Why? What's the story here? And quite simply, identity is the answer we supply to that question. It's the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. You know, think about all the different bits of your life. There's your age and your sex and your social status, there's your education, there's your future job, there's your sexuality, there's your relationship commitments, there's your passions and interests and ambitions, as we've been hearing from Matthew. And a personal identity takes all those different bits and then it puts them together and says, here's the plot line. These are the headlines about who I am. This is what gives shape and meaning to all those different bits and puts them together around some sort of whole, some sort of meaningful story. And why is it important that we have a kind of a coherent story about ourselves? Well, because without this inner core, we'd be like rudderless ships tossed about in a storm, you know, behaving this way one day and another way the next. There's no core to us. There's no sense of purpose and direction. Believing one thing today, another thing tomorrow. Nothing to provide ballast, stability. Philosopher Matthew Crawford put it, without the ability to direct our attention where we will, we become captive to all those people out there who would direct our attention to where they will. And there are a lot of them out there, aren't there, fighting for our attention. Quite a few of you will be feeling that tug just now as the dopamine thirst kicks in. You need to kind of just get it out. And you know, who here's got the phone out, opened it up, looked, and you haven't yet thought what you're looking for? And there's a world out there that's seeking to train us, because attention is like a commodity. It's in short supply, and everyone wants a bit of it, because when I get your attention, potentially I get your money. And so identity helps us fight back against that. And it says, no, I'm not that, I'm this. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. I'm not a vegan today and a fox hunter tomorrow. Here is the ballast that gives direction to my life. So personal identity, this inner core, brings stability, coherence. It says, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. So here's the question I want to put before you tonight, and it's similar to the one we talked about at lunchtime, actually. With all this stuff going on in our lives, all the people wanting our attention, what are the defining themes of your developing sense of identity? What gives your life meaning and purpose and ballast, stability? Social class? Is it passion for sport? Is it your nationality, your gender, your ethnic background? What's the headline? And there are two popular approaches to this question. First, you look outside of yourself for the answer, and you look for something that you can make your cause, your passion, your thing. And even if you started out not caring about it all that much, you end up, it gives you such a buzz, such a sense of meaning, it becomes your thing, you see. And sometimes people look outside themselves to their inherited status in society, and that provides them with their sense of self. You know, the family you come from, or the school you went to, or the university you graduated from, and on the face of it, those kind of identity markers can look pretty stable. You know, my parents well, he's actually Lord Falconer of, so and so, and that gives you a certain sense of position. That's not true of me, by the way. It's not mine. I'm just making that up. So, trouble is, although it looks stable, even social positions like these today, in a fast-changing world, are not set in concrete, are they? Cultures change, the mighty fall, things shift, and suddenly people don't care where you came from anymore. I don't give a button whether you're Lord Falconer's son or anybody else. It's not where you came from, it's where you're going to that matters. That's what we're interested in about you. Things change. The Me Too movement suddenly calls out the rich and the powerful, and yesterday they were beating a path to your door, and now, today, nobody wants to know you. So it's much harder in today's fast-paced culture to rely on those kind of external things. Now, the alternative route out there is to put your shoulder to the wheel with achievements, isn't it? So, that's something you can do and rely on. And I shared a bit about last night, how I failed the 11 plus and my dream of becoming a doctor. And from a working class background, everything rode on that exam. And at age 11, which was the big parting of the ways, the thick boys went upstairs and the bright boys went to grammar school, and I got the letter that said the thick boys, and all my dreams crumbled. And my grandmother took me aside and she tried to console me, and she said, people, it's a great idea, Glynn wanting to be a doctor, but what you've got to understand is that our kind of people, we don't do things like that. And something in me rebelled against that, and thank God something in my father rebelled against that, and it didn't turn out that way because I had another story about how I could be, but that story actually turned out to be I could do it myself. I didn't need to rely on our kind of people. I could achieve, and I could work, and I could do well in my exams and get to university, and then beyond that work hard and be driven. And achievement sounds great, and it can be intoxicating, as we were talking about at lunchtime, because you decide whether you're going to get out of bed in the morning. You're in control. You're getting the achievement. Or is it? What happens again with Matthew? What happens when you stop achieving, or when things don't work out, or you get ill or sick or disabled, and all the people who are fawning over you because you were the rising star just not interested in you anymore? And you discover that your achievements felt solid, but actually it's the boom or bust ego. You're only as good as your last kick, your last goal, your last performance, your last thing. So that's looking outside yourself. The other approach to finding your identity is to look inside yourself. And this is all around us today. You can't watch a Disney film without saying, "Hey, you be you." Just look inside yourself. Be who you are. Sounds great, doesn't it? It's anything that's got the word "just" in front of it, folks. Just. Always be a little suspicious. You just need to believe in yourself. Oh, and buy this book, by the way. But it feels right, doesn't it? As Madonna sang, "I am my own experiment. I am my own work of art." Well, not to like. Nobody can take away from you what you authentically are. And it sounds good. But here's the problem. My car was coming up 10 years old recently. Thought it was time to trade it in. And I couldn't get anybody to buy it in an advert I placed. So I ended up selling it to one of these, webuyouroldbanger.com. And you enter your details into a website and they give you a fabulous amount of money for it, and you go along all sparkly eyed, and then they spot a tiny little thing here, that's £500 off, and then there's a little scratch there, another 500, and then another 500 for that, and you discover it's falling. And the smart guy who beat me down and wrote me a rather small check at the end of it, young guy, and he was busy writing up some of the details on his computer. This is down in London, and I'm always interested in people. I got talking to him, and so I said, well, what brings you to London? Because I could tell, he mentioned he'd not been here all that long. He said, well, I came here to be with my brother. Actually, is from over in Europe, and the rest of Europe, well, another part of Europe. And so I said, well, yeah. So you just came to be with your brother? Must have been something else. He said, well, I just came to look around, and he said, well, if I'm honest, I guess I came to find myself. And I said, never talked to a psychiatrist, but I don't know what. Anyway, I said, but what happens when you found yourself and you don't like what you see? And he thought, and he said, do you want to go for a coffee? And we went for a coffee. Actually, he didn't give me a bigger check, I'm afraid, but he did pay for the coffee. So, but it's a good question, isn't it? What happens when you look inside yourself and you don't like what you see? Because you see, I look inside myself, and when I do, I'll be honest, I think I've got some real strengths. I think I'm good at some things. I don't think that makes me better than anybody here, or better than anybody out there, or more important, but I do think I'm good at some things. I'm really good at some things. And when I'm good at some things, I feel a sense of pleasure in them. And that's there. But that's not all I see. If I look a bit closer, I see there's a crack running through everything inside. It's what I call the HPSU, human propensity to screw things up. And I'm talking about when I spoil my friendships with jealousy or pride. I make promises I don't keep, and I can really want to get even with somebody. I see that. And do you see that? I want to get even. I want to get even. And sometimes I like it when other people fail. I say, that is such a pity, but I like it. I like it. And you want me to be true to myself? Which bit? That bit? Because I look inside myself, and besides there's some good stuff, but I see selfishness and meanness, and the need to have things my way, and the way I treat my wife sometimes, and I find a shadowy self of self-serving deceitfulness that I think sometimes has its roots, feels like in hell. It's a shadow. It's what the Bible calls sin, actually. Sin is quite simply the crack that runs, it's this crack that runs through everything. The HPSU. Things going so well and it screws up. And so I'm left asking, well, I mean, it sounds good, but is there something for me to build on with stronger foundations than that? Something that accepts me as I am, but then doesn't leave me as I am. That's what I want. Something that says be real about yourself, but then doesn't say you're on your own now. That's what I kind of look for. Something that doesn't try to paper over the crack, but does a renovation job. It goes deep. And last night Glynn got us to have a look in this little biography of Jesus, and I'm here. I want to talk about how the Christian story talks about this big problem of identity that we have. If you like to grab one in front of you, I know it's a slightly weird thing to do, but it's a bit of the Bible. It's a brief biography of Jesus Christ's life, and it's written by somebody called Mark, who was one of his followers. And I'm just going to read 4 verses from it in the first place. Okay? So I want you to turn to page 4. Last night Glynn kicked us off in the opening verses, the good news. Okay? And I want to go to Page 4, and just a few more verses on, and it's verse 16. I'm just going to read 4 verses. Follow along with me. As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. And at once they left their nets, probably no more astonished. Nobody was more astonished than they were, and followed him. And when he'd gone a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, what a great name, and his brother John in a boat preparing their nets. And without delay he called them too. And they left their father in the boat with the hired men. They were running a business. They abandoned the business. And to everyone's astonishment, including their own, they followed him. It's a little bit of the story tonight. And there are 2 things here. First, do you see what happens when Jesus looks their way and says, follow me? He accepts them as they are. In fact, he wants them as they are. He says yes to them as precious human beings. In that follow me, that I want you, there's an acceptance of them as they are. And in word, he loves them. They'll discover that. And this is the first point about what the Christian story has to say about identity. It's rooted, Christian identity, in a God who accepts us as we are and wants us as we are. And here's the second point. His love accepts them as they are, but notice it doesn't leave them as they are. It doesn't say, follow me, but stay right where you are, guys. He says, follow me. And they got up and left him. And their lives changed direction radically. They experienced a renaming. They became followers of this rabbi, and a remaking. Now they were going to be following him. Their lives were going to be rooted in a new story about who they were. Priorities were going to be reordered, and it took them quite some time to work out what this new identity as followers of Christ meant. I mean, for example, they soon discovered Jesus isn't interested in their lust for social markers of power and importance. Turn over to chapter 9. It's on page 46. Okay? And now we're rattling on in the story, and we're moving through Jesus' life. And at the bottom, did I say 40? Yes, 46. And we're reading from verse 30. They left that place and passed through Galilee. Jesus, now they're all together, the disciples with Jesus. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were, because he was teaching his disciples. He was paying attention to them. And he said to them, the Son of Man, that's a phrase he used of himself, and it comes from the Old Testament. It was one of the markers of the coming Messiah, this term. He says, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they'll kill him. And after 3 days, he will rise. But they did not understand what he meant, and were afraid to ask him about it. This was so dissonant with their picture of what Messiahs do. Messiahs don't get strung up. Messiahs throw out the Romans, re-establish the great throne of Israel, restore the throne of David, and everyone gets an important place in the kingdom. And the disciples in some ways were so preoccupied with who gets what place that they could barely hear what Jesus said. They didn't want to hear what Jesus said about dying on a cross. And so they kind of bury all that to one side. In verse 33, they came to Capernaum, where he was in the house, and he asked them, what were you arguing about along the road? A good question. See how human this record is. So you guys, what were you arguing about as we were going along the road? But they kept quiet, because on the way they'd argued about, can you believe, who was going to be the greatest. And sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and he said, anyone who wants to be first must be last, the servant of all. And he took a little child and he got this little kid and he placed her among them, or him among them, and taking the child in his arms, he scoops the kid up. He says to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. And scooping up a little child, he says, you're scooping up something important. In Greek and Roman culture, kids were at the bottom of the heap. They were the bottom of the social pile. That's why in Greek and Roman culture, expositio is where you left unwanted kids out in the open, either to die or to be picked up and trafficked. And one of the early markers of the Christian community, the Christian church when it was established, was people remembered these words of Jesus and the value he gave to kids. And they refused straight away, the early Christians, to do expositio or anything else that harmed human life. And people looked in on their communities and they said, it's odd you've got the same number of little girls as little boys. We don't, because people don't want little girls, so we put them out. Very quickly, it was strange, Christians, the way that they valued not only children, but they valued women as well as men, because they remembered these words of Jesus and they realized that Jesus' message about who we are subverts all those identity markers of importance and prestige and achievement and gender and anything else about you. None of that counts as what defines you, said Jesus. None of that really counts. But you know, as the story unfolds further, it's going to be quite some time before they really understand and experience just what their new identity really means. And Mark's fast-paced biography speeds toward its terrible close, when the man they gave up everything to follow gets, well, he doesn't get picked up, he seems to hand himself in to be crucified. And they string him up naked. And the man they'd seen as the Messiah seems helpless, bleeding, and dying. And the men who'd given up everything to follow him, in fact, they'd sworn blind that they would never desert him. Whatever happened, they scattered like sheep. We'll hear tomorrow night. One of them, Peter, he swore and cursed, never heard of Jesus when he was confronted by a maiden girl in a courtyard. Never heard of him, and he cursed. And it was in that moment that they all discovered who they really were. The cowardice, the self-seeking, self-serving crack that ran through everything about them. And it's only then that they finally understood what that new identity meant. It meant as they looked up to that cross that they'd find the source of their forgiveness being put right again. You see, Christian story is that Jesus shoulders their sin and our sin. He draws it, the crackness, the brokenness, into his own body, and he suffers in our place. Glynn said last night, God himself in Jesus joins us in our filth so we can join him in his family. And this tying up is what it means to be a Christian. To be remade, to be renamed, to find ballast in your soul, to be loved by someone who doesn't just accept you as you are, he doesn't leave you as you are either. He brings you home, forgiven, renewed, renamed. I just want to finish by returning to those other identity markers we talked about at the beginning, maybe you say, well, I'm a feminist because those issues of justice really matter to me. And someone else says, well, I'm a vegan because I think that is a moral, it's kind of an ethical thing for me. Or someone says, I'm an eco-warrior, and I'm an anti-racist. Or even I'm a basketball player or an ice hockey player, and I'm an actor. And where do they fit now in this new identity? Those passions, those gifts, those abilities. I want you to do a thought experiment with me. I want you to imagine, I know it's not going to happen, but I want you to imagine that you became a Christian, that you are a Christian. It's a big jump, I know, but I want you to do the thought experiment. How would it look, those passions now? It simply look like this. You wouldn't be asked to give them up. You'd find renewed impetus for social justice, for doing good, for doing right, for looking out for the people at the bottom of the heap. Only now, those passions wouldn't be the foundation of who you are. That's God's love for you. That's his renaming of you. They become the expression of who you are, the outworking of who you are. You don't have to give up your passions. You just find that your passions find a new source in who you are as a follower of Christ. Last year, Letitia Wright, a Guyanese-born British actor who shot to fame for her role in Black Panther. If you remember, she landed the prestigious 2019 BAFTA Rising Star Award, and she took it in a moving acceptance speech you probably saw. And she spoke about her identity as a Christian. And I quote, she said, "I identify myself as a child of God." And holding this BAFTA thing in her hand, she says, and I can't get up here without thanking God. I was in the dark, you see, going through so many bad things. I needed to take a break from acting because I idolized it. She could have said it consumed me. But then she said, having stopped acting for a while, I went on a journey to discover my relationship with God. And I became a Christian. And folks, now here she is as a Christian, back in acting, and she's a rising star. But now, this thing that she's holding in her hand, this BAFTA award, that isn't the foundation of who she is. In a year, everyone will have forgotten it anyway because there are new awards being given out and others are pulling ahead all of the time. She's back in the race. Now, this thing isn't the foundation of who she is. That's what she's saying. She said, I thank God it's an expression of who I am and the gifts he's given me. And God is an artist and I'm an artist. God is a creator and I love being creative. God does stuff and is playful. And I'm like that too, because now I bear his image and I bear his identity. And I just want to say, I wonder where you are in relation to all of this. And I know if we had a kind of a scale of 1 to 5, and 1 is no thanks, mate, I only came in for the pizza and then got trapped on a table over here. That's 1, all right? And if 5 is do you know, I think I'm almost there. I want to come home. I see the crack. I even sense God himself is nudging me right now. If you're somewhere between 1 and 3, I'd love to persuade you keep looking. If you're intellectually curious, ask questions. Talk to the person you came along with who invited you here. Ask more questions, put them on the spot, because the Christian faith is an intellectually credible faith. But if you're a 4 or nearly a 5, I want to say there comes a point, folks, where asking more questions can just become a lifestyle. It can just become a block, a thing. And almost anything I've done in my life that's been worthwhile, in the end I've just got to dive in do it. And I just want to encourage you at some point to put an end to questions and say, now, I sense that God, I think I know enough. I'm going to dive in. And diving in is ABC. It's accepting there's wrong in your life, needs putting right. B, it's believing that Jesus came looking for you to die in your place. C, it's committing to him, to that new way of life. And last night Glynn did that weird thing. Do you remember at the end he kind of prayed to God? And I know some folk that must kind of be really weird, so I'm going to be just as weird tonight, just now. And I'm going to invite us to pray. If you're not a prayer, just go along with that. I don't want to invite anybody to do something hypocritical or something that's not you. But I do want to give an opportunity for someone who might be close to 5. And I just want to say, this is the kind of prayer that you might well pray if you go over that edge. Commit. So I'm going to pray it. It's the kind of prayer you might pray. You might find yourself praying it, and if you do, come and talk to me after, or talk to the person someone who brought you, or go away and talk a bit more to God, but then come back and find out more and share that with somebody. So can I invite us just now to pray, and I'm going to pray that prayer, and it will be something like this. Lord, I just want to pray initially, thank you so much for being here tonight, and we pray that you'll illuminate our thinking. And Lord, for somebody who may be close, we say this prayer. Lord, we sense that you're reaching out to me. I've heard about you. I've been touched and challenged by what I've heard, what I've seen. And a big part of me is saying I need to do business with you. And I thank you that you accept me as I am with the crack that run through. I believe you died for me. I commit my life into your hands. I want to follow you. Amen. Amen. Thanks so much, folks. And where's Callum? Come back to Callum. Thank you.